What do a farmer in 1000 AD, staring at the sky, searching for divine signs, and you, modern founder, staring at your metrics dashboard at 3 a.m., what do you have in common? Well, more than you think. Today, I'm taking you on a journey through the last 1000 years of human history to discover why you run. Why do you do what you do every day? Why did you become an entrepreneur? You see, there are two types of founders out there. Both master pattern recognition, our innate ability to see how the system works and how to optimize them, and after all, how to build our companies on them. But the difference between these two types is really profound. The first group believes that success is a race, that the faster you run and the more that you win. I lived like that for over 10 years, always chasing the next milestone, the next metric, until I realized one day that I kept feeling 12 steps behind an invisible finish line that kept moving forward. The second group, on the other hand, has learned to pause. They learned to ask the forbidden question: why are we running? And what I discovered is that the difference between these two mindsets doesn't just distinguish entrepreneurs, it's a repeated pattern that we can observe throughout all of history. Because the question is not a new question at all. It's one that humanity has been asking for centuries, and it's still the single most important question that people ignore, let alone to answer. With this video, I decided to attempt to give an answer. It's the answer that I built up over the years of connecting the tech world from one end and science and the deep interest in ancient wisdom and philosophy on the other. But it's also a question that I keep reading and rereading in some of the best books out there. Some of the best minds in our history already asked this question, of course, and it all starts from looking at our past with a slightly different perspective. We used to study history as a sequence of facts and dates, but what if we do so by analyzing it with another lens? From the lens of changing psychology of the people's mind, analyzing not what people were simply doing, but especially why they were doing it and how they were feeling while doing it. To understand why entrepreneurs run, we need to understand when humanity started running in the very first place. Because history is not just the evolution of technology, it's the evolution of thought. And by understanding the reality of how people thought before us, we can then see why we look the world with the same lens that we do right now, and what our contribution is toward this further progress. We can pinpoint where we come in, so to speak, in the longer development of civilizations, and that gives us a sense of where we are going right now. So let's make a step back to a couple of thousand of years ago, to the inception of the monotheistic religions, to the Middle Ages, when, let's say, our Western civilization and society of today has been developed. Let's imagine that we're now alive in the year 1000. The first thing that you must understand is that the reality of this time is being defined completely by the power of the church, the churchmen. And because of their position, these men had great influence over the minds of the population. And the world that these churchmen describe as real is above everything spiritual. They're creating a reality which places their idea about God's plan for mankind at the very center of life. Try to visualize this. You find yourself in the class of your father. Essentially, you're either a peasant or an aristocrat, and you know that you will always be confined to that class. But regardless of which class you're in, or the particular work that you're doing, you soon realize that the social position is actually secondary, because the spiritual reality of life is what really defined your life. Life is about passing a spiritual test that you discover. And the churchmen explain that God has placed mankind at the center of his universe, surrounded by an entire cosmos for one solitary purpose: to win or lose salvation. You didn't really have much else to think about at the time. And in this trial, you must correctly choose between the opposite sides: the force of God, the light, and the lurking temptation of the devil, the dark side. And here's what is important. In this world, no one, literally no one, is asking, why am I here? Because they already knew. The answer is already provided. Your purpose is quite clear. Your reality is defined. The churchmen tell you that every step of your way, whether you are in accordance with God or whether you're being duped by Satan, is all controlled by them. If you follow their instructions, of course, you're assured that a rewarding afterlife will follow. But if you fail to hit the course they prescribe, then, well, excommunication, certain damnation, and of course, afterlife full of pain and darkness. Every aspect of the medieval world is actually defined in these overworldly terms. All of the phenomena of life, from the chance of a thunderstorm or an earthquake, or the success of crops and the death of a loved one, everything, literally every single thing, is defined either as a will of God or the malice of the devil. There is no concept of weather or geological forces or horticulture or disease. All that comes later. For now, you completely believe the churchman. The world you take for granted operates solely by a spiritual means. But then in the 14th and 15th centuries, something very big changes. The medieval worldview starts to fall apart. First, you notice certain improprieties in the part of the churchmen themselves, right? You secretly violating their vows of chastity, for example, or taking gratuities to look the other way when governmental or some rich people, official, violate the scripture. But these improprieties alarm you because the churchmen hold themselves to be the only connection between you and God. Remember, they're the only interpreters of the scriptures. They are the sole arbitrators of your salvation. So if they do something that doesn't make so much sense, then you actually hold it very quiet to yourself. And if you remember a tiny bit of history, you recall a group led by Martin Luther calling for a complete break from the papal Christianity. The churchmen are corrupt, they say, demanding an end to the churchman reign over the minds of the people. So a very first big revolution starts to happen. The new churches are being formed and based on the idea that each person should be able to access the scriptures personally and to interpret them as they wish, with no middleman. As you watch in this belief, the rebellion succeeds and the churchman begins to lose. For centuries, these men defined reality, and now, finally, after 1,000 years, before your eyes, they are losing their credibility. Consequently, the whole world is being thrown into question. Try to imagine it for a second. The clear consensus about the nature of the universe and about humankind's purpose is based on what was described by the churchman itself, and now it's collapsing, leaving you and all of the other humans next to you in the Western culture in a very, very precarious place. After all, you have grown up accustomed to having an authority in your life, and without that external direction, you feel confused, eventually even lost. If the churchman description of reality and the reason for human existence is wrong, you ask, then what is right? Why am I here? Do you see the impact of this collapse on the peoples of the day? Can you catch the tremendous upheaval and what people must have felt while their worldview was challenged everywhere? Well, in fact, by the 1600s, astronomers had proved beyond a doubt that the sun and the stars did not revolve around the Earth as maintained by the Church. And clearly, the Earth was only a one small planet orbiting a minor sun in a galaxy that contains billions of other stars. Mankind has lost its place at the center of God's universe. Now, when you watch the weather or the plants growing or someone suddenly dying, what you feel is anxious bafflement. In the past, you might have said, well, God is responsible or the devil, but as the medieval world view breaks down, then that certainty goes with it. All of the things that you took for granted now need a new definition, especially the nature of God and your relationship to God. With that awareness, the modern age begins. And remember, we are still trying to answer the main question, which is, why do we run? And you see, in that time, there is a growing democratic spirit and a mass distrust of the papal and the royal authorities. Defining definitions of the universe based on speculation or scriptural faith are no longer automatically accepted. In spite of loss of certainty, we didn't want to risk some new group controlling our reality as the churchmen had. So we created a new mandate for science. So we looked at the vast, undefined universe, and we thought, as did the thinkers of the day, that we needed a method of consensus building, a way to systematically explore this new world of ours. And we called this the scientific method, which is nothing more than testing an idea about how the universe works, arriving afterward at some conclusion, and then offering this conclusion to others to see if they agree. Then we prepared explorers to go out into this new universe, each armed with their own scientific method, and we gave them their historic mission: explore this place for us and find out how it works and what it means to find ourselves alive in it. We knew that we had lost our certainty about God and the God-ruled universe, and because of that, our certainty about the nature of God himself. But we felt we had a method, at least, a consensus-building process through which we could discover the nature of everything around us, including God, and including the true purpose of mankind existing on this planet. So we sent these explorers out to find the true nature of our situation and to report back. But here where everything changed, here where we began the preoccupation from which hopefully we are awakening now. We sent these explorers out to bring back a complete explanation, a complete understanding of our existence. But because of the complexity of the universe, they weren't able to return right away. When the scientific method couldn't bring back a new picture of God and mankind's purpose on the planet, well, a lack of certainty and meaning affected the Western culture very, very deep. We needed something else to do until our questions were answered, and eventually we arrived at what seemed to be a very logical solution for the time. We looked at each other and said, well, since our explorers did not come back yet with our true spiritual situation, well, why not settle into this new world of ours while we are waiting? We are certainly learning enough to manipulate this new world for our benefit. So why not, in the meantime, raise our standards of living, our sense of security in this world? And that's exactly what we did 4 centuries ago. We shook off our feeling of being lost by taking matters into our own hands, by focusing on conquering the hurt and using its resources to better our own situation. And only now we can see what happened. Our focus gradually became a preoccupation. We totally lost ourselves in creating a secular security, an economic security to replace the spiritual one that we literally had lost from one day to another. The question of why we are alive, of what was actually going on here spiritually, was slowly pushed away and repressed altogether. Working to establish a more comfortable lifestyle, not just for survival, but to feel complete in and of itself, became a new reason to live. And we gradually, methodically forgotten our original question. We've forgotten that we still don't know what are we surviving for. And this is exactly what the first type of entrepreneurs does. They optimize for survival. They build for building's sake. They run the race without even knowing where the finish line is. They're not just building companies, they're running a 400-year-old program. But here, what I discovered by talking to founders all around the world and by diving deep into ancient wisdom and modern science. We are at the end of that period. We are finally getting the answers back. Our explorers, the scientists, the philosophers, the spiritual seekers, they are all returning, and they're bringing back to us the answers that we sought for so long. The second type of entrepreneur, well, they're the ones who have started listening to what's coming back. They've realized that the time of the preoccupation, the endless optimization, the metrics, the growth, and the growth's sake, well, it was only ever meant to be temporary, a placeholder while we figure out the real questions. They understand that we are at a turning point, that humanity is waking up from a century-long trance where we forgot to ask why we are alive in the very first place. These founders build differently, not because they've rejected growth or success, but because they've put those things in their proper context. They are running not from uncertainty anymore, but they're running towards something. They're asking, what is this actually for? What world am I changing? What does it mean to be alive and building right now at this particular moment in human history? And here's what makes this moment so profound. For the very first time since the medieval world collapsed, well, we put enough pieces into the puzzle to start forming a new picture. We understand consciousness differently. We understand systems and interconnections. We are rediscovering ancient wisdom with the modern tools. We are building the bridge between the spiritual questions that we abandoned and the material world that we mastered so much. The certainty that we lost when the churchmen fell, well, we're not getting that back. And fortunately, that's good. But we're getting something better. A new kind of clarity, one that doesn't require an external authority to tell us why are we here, one that we are discovering together through the same consensus building mechanism that we created to explore the physical universe in the very first place. So when I look at these two types of entrepreneurs now, I don't see it as a permanent divide. I see it as a choice point. You can keep running the old program. That's really up to you. Keep optimizing your survival, your security, your metrics. Keep feeling 12 steps behind at the finish line that you never consciously defined. Or you can remember what we are actually doing here. I spent 10 years as this third type of entrepreneur, always chasing, always building, always running. And I was good at it, but I was also extremely exhausted. Because deep down, I knew I was avoiding the real question. The moment I stopped and asked, why am I running? Everything shifted. Not because I stopped building, but because I started building for a reason that actually mattered. The entrepreneurs that I've interviewed who've made this shift, well, they're not only more successful, but they're even building companies that feel like contributions to something larger. They're asking the questions our culture has been avoiding for hundreds of years. And they're rediscovering that when you stop running from uncertainty and you start running towards purpose, the race doesn't disappear. It just finally starts to make sense. This is what I call becoming a quantum founder, not someone who has rejected the ambition or the success, let's be very clear, but someone who has learned to operate from a different state of consciousness completely. So here's my question to you. What are you running toward? And more importantly, do you know why are you running? Because that question, the one that humanity has been asking for so long, is not just a philosophical question. It's the most practical question that you'll ever answer.